Hi, I am Candace Garcia, and this is my media clip project, and I have entitled it Universal Design and Exceptionalities. So I'm going to start with what is universal design. Universal design is the application of techniques to the curriculum or what we're teaching to allow all students to best access the material that is being taught. And what I think is most important about that definition is two words: all students. Universal design lets us teach students and adjust so that all students can best learn. We want all students to best learn in a way that allows them to be able to learn. Without this, they can't learn. So while I'm going to go over some techniques in a specific exceptionality, these techniques can be and should be used for different students if it would help them learn, if it would suit them and help them, because we want them all to learn. So it's for all students. These designs are for all students to best help them understand what is being taught. So the first exceptionality that I'm going to talk about is a learning disability, and there are two kind of subsets of learning disabilities. First, there are reading disabilities, and these affect approximately 4 to 8% of students. And in that, there are different types of problems that students struggle with. Students may struggle with phonemic awareness, which is the ability to hear the sounds within a word. They may struggle with word identification, which is decoding and being able to break apart a word to read it. Word reading fluency, which is being able to read a word or read fluently and smoothly and accurately. And then reading comprehension, which is reading a passage so that you understand what is happening. Within that, the early age is the younger children tend to have more problems with the first three: phonemic awareness, word identification, and reading fluency. Once children get out of kind of elementary school, they tend to then begin to have more problems with reading comprehension. And then within learning disabilities, students also can have mathematic disabilities. And this affects about 7% of secondary aged students. And mathematic disabilities is two groups. There are students who have procedural problems. And procedural problems are students who just have difficulties breaking down and understanding the steps and processes of a math problem. They get lost somewhere in doing the math process. They just are not comprehending and understanding what to do. They just get lost somewhere. And then there are students who have a difficulty with fact retrieval. They have difficulty remembering and memorizing the numbers and the facts that are a part of math. And even if they do get them memorized, they may have difficulty retrieving those numbers when they are required to do so. As with this, students with learning disabilities also struggle with short-term memory as well as long-term memory, and they also have a higher incidence of depression and anxiety while they're in school. And so, how can we best help these students with learning disabilities through universal design? One way that our book told us to help through universal design is through advanced organizers. An advanced organizer is a type of graphic organizer. These type of graphic organizers help to present and show students the information before they begin to learn it. It kind of gives them a head start as to what they're going to learn. It teaches them what they're going to learn before they learn it. And this gives them a little bit of a head start. It allows them when they're learning it with their peers to more actively listen and more actively participate, because they are able to anticipate what what they're going to know, what they're going to learn. They are already beginning to think about it and understand and get those kind of gears rolling. And these kind of advanced organizers are good for things like science, social studies, reading comprehension. The next exceptionality that I wanted to discuss was the autism spectrum disorders. So with autism spectrum disorders, students have impairments in social and emotional communications. And with that, that means that students struggle with social and emotional reciprocity. Sorry, I'm really struggling with that word. They struggle with nonverbal communication, and they struggle with maintaining relationships. So social and emotional reciprocity, I swear I've practiced that, means that they are not understanding the back and forth of friendships and social relationships and things. It's kind of like a one-way street, or no street. They may just talk and talk and talk about their interests, and not understand that communication and these social relationships with peers and stuff are, and even amongst their teachers and things are two-way. I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk type of thing. These students may not understand nonverbal communication, and that is eye contact, body language, those kind of things. Those are areas that they may struggle in. And they also will have difficulty maintaining relationships, friendships, kind of maybe isolated. They may have difficulty building those relationships even if they do. Students also will, with autism spectrum disorders, have a tendency to have repetitive and restricted behaviors and interests. If they have a tendency to find something that they love and love it really hard and want to learn all the things about it as far as interests. And then repetitive and restrictive behaviors, they may not want to have anything to do with one thing, or just really only a narrow set of things. And then some of the things that they may like to do are, move around in a certain way, like to sit in certain places, chew on certain things, those type of things, which can take place in a classroom. As far as intellectual needs, with autism, there is a wide range of intellectual needs with students with autism. Students can range from low IQs to very high IQs. So with autism, there's really no area. It's going to vary from student to student as to what those intellectual needs will be. So for universal design for students with autism spectrum disorders, our book suggested mnemonic strategies. This will play well to students, some students' ability to memorize things. Some students with autism really have the ability to memorize things. And so this would be a great way to allow students to memorize things. Some of these mnemonic strategies include keyword strategies, which is to take a word and a word that you know, and then learn a new word through attaching it to a word that you know. Peg word strategies, which is to link is to remember a number or some new word through like a number or something, usually that rhymes. And then a letter strategy is some sort of acronym to help you remember some kind of concept or something. The one that I remember most as a child is the colors of the rainbow, which was Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Over here we have the steps to divide, which I just showed my son, who is a 5th grader, and he thought it was great, which is how to divide. Does McDonald's serve burgers? Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. The next exceptionality that I would like to discuss is traumatic brain injuries. I wanted to discuss traumatic brain injuries because they have a lot of similar characteristics with with other exceptionalities that we have discussed throughout this course. They share characteristics with learning disabilities, communication disorders, emotional behavioral disorders, intellectual disabilities, and health impairments. And while they may share these things, not every person with a traumatic brain injury is going to have all of these characteristics. It's going to vary greatly from person to person. And so with that, a person with a traumatic brain injury is going to vary. These traumatic brain injuries are going to be different based even on the person, from when the traumatic brain injury happened, how bad it was, and how the recovery happened. And these traumatic brain injuries do depend on what part of the brain was affected and what kind of injury it was. So it's going to be a very different experience for every person. Even if it appears that they have the same injury, it's going to be very different depending on the people, on the person. So some strategies to help those through universal design with traumatic brain injuries is instructional pacing. Instructional pacing is a strategy that helps you to deliver information in smaller sections that are kind of easier to manage. And some really important things to remember about instructional pacing is that you, as an instructor, have to make sure that you are using an appropriate pace. The pace at which you are delivering this information has to be appropriate. You have to have a very level pace that's appropriate for your students. You don't want to be just rapid firing delivering information so that the students are not understanding and comprehending what they're doing, and you also don't want to be delivering it so slowly that students are bored. So you have to really use an appropriate pace for those students that you are delivering it to. And again, this will depend on the students that you are working with. The next thing is that you should, as an instructor, should be monitoring for frequent responses. These responses should be varied. You should, choose different types of responses to make sure that students are understanding the information. Maybe written responses, oral responses, different ways to have students respond so that they are engaged in what is happening and understanding and engaged in everything that's happening. The next thing is that to make sure that there is adequate processing time so that students have time to process, to understand everything that they are learning. Because if there's not time to understand what they're learning, then they won't absorb it and won't understand it, and they won't really retain it in the long run if there's not time to understand and grasp it and kind of let it soak in, that information. If we just kind of throw it at them and say, hope you learned it, then it hasn't really done them any good. The next one that's really, really important is for the instructor, is myself, is to monitor the responses. As an instructor, you have to be frequently monitoring responses. This allows you to adapt. If you are monitoring responses frequently, you can look and see and make sure that your students are understanding what you are instructing. And if they are not, if you notice that they are not understanding, it allows you to immediately adapt what you're doing so that you can stop and adjust and meet the needs of the students very quickly, because something's not working. So monitoring responses is very important in this instructional pacing design. And then offering frequent feedback. Frequent feedback is nice because it allows students to very quickly understand if they've got something. If it allows you to give them feedback. You've done it right. You've done a great job. Good job. Or to give them feedback if they've done something incorrect, and then they can kind of fix it, and you can work together to try to fix the problems. And so this is my media clip project on exceptionalities and universal design. And thank you.